Welcome back to my conversation with Frank Freeman. You had mentioned that you are currently doing homeschooling and then also preparing for public school. How do you find it easiest to adjust to both of your kids' needs and wants when it comes to their education? Because we know not all kids learn the same. Is that something that you guys have had to learn? And how do you learn that? What advice do you have for anybody who is considering homeschooling?
Well, biggest advice or thing I could say is homeschooling. It's pretty wild and it's pretty challenging. And for anyone to say, and I'm going to hand it off to my wife, that she has really stuck to this and nailed it. And I don't think that's something that I could have done. And so some people think, oh yeah, the kids are just at home and hanging out and whatnot. This is a full-time job and teachers get paid to do this job. So it is a serious thing, and I have to give respect for people who will homeschool. So the consideration, a lot of times, we were thinking schools mainly for girls, and they kind of cater it towards girls in some ways and less towards boys. Whether that's true or not, young men get antsy. They need to go do stuff. They need to get up and move around. Maybe they learn a little differently. Well, we can cater our education to my daughter or to my son. My daughter is extremely motivated, and I feel like she kind of doesn't even need me half the time, to be honest. But my son, yeah, he's the baby boy. He needs some help. And, there's different areas where they might be stronger in, whereas at public school, they would get left behind. And this is not a slam on public school, it's just, if you have 20, 30 kids, you cannot just stop for the one kid who's a challenge, whether he's misbehaving or just has a learning disability or whatever that is. It's hard to stop for that one person. Well, we can cater our education to that child. And okay, you're really strong in math, but your motor skills aren't good. Okay, we can cater our work to hit heavy on that. And so also, we had a short-term plan. It was every year was like, hey, let's just see how this goes. And then we can quit at any time. We were not so sold that this is how life has to be. And so my daughter loves it and was like, both kids are in the schools. They have friends everywhere. There's no issue of socialization. In fact, we can get the kind of socialization that's great and leave out the socialization that's dangerous. And my son now is like, hey, I want to go have the full experience. Well, we're not holding him back. We're just preparing him for that. So now next year he will go be a freshman and see how that goes. And we'll see if he wants to stick that out or if he's going to want to come back home, but he has that option to do that now.
You'd made the comment about if someone's not getting something. One of the things that actually happens here in Greeley-Evans District 6 is because there's multiple schools throughout the district, and all first graders learned the exact same thing today. Every elementary school, whether the children got this stuff yesterday or not, they learned the same thing today. So there is no time for, I don't know what to tell you if you didn't get that. We're moving on because we have to stay on track. Their thinking is that if a student transfers from one school to another, so one first grade class to another, that they will still be all on the same page. But if the child was behind, it's not going to make a difference, whether or not. And so I do think that that is one thing that I went to a really small school and 20 kids in a class. That was a big, big class for us. And that wasn't very common. And so when you didn't get things, it wasn't that hard for the teacher to take you to the back of the room and work with you one-on-one while the rest of the class, continued going on because they were getting it or whatever. And I can definitely see how that would be beneficial in homeschooling, to be able to take that time to say, hey, yep, and maybe it's not even like we're going to work on this for the next 4 hours. It's like, okay, we know that this is a struggle. We can come back to this. We can keep working on this and not have to be like, okay, next.
Can get up and you can get up and go shoot some hoops outside and come back in just at a random moment, just to kind of loosen things up and come back and get back to work. And that's a beauty of being able to do that.
I did my bachelor's and my master's degree all online and did not go into a classroom at all for it. So in my mind, that's kind of like the same thing as homeschooling, because I basically,
Sure.
Read the notes, read the text that was given by the professors and so on. And I definitely felt like for me, that was so much better than making me sit in a classroom, because Yes, there was times where I had to be like, all right, I got to buckle down and I got to do my work right now. I can't mess around. But also if I was having a day where I'm like, my cat died or, something, I could be in my feelings and not have to try to force myself to focus on school. And I think that's something that we don't do for our kids enough, even in the mornings, right? If my kids wake up in the morning and they're having a rough morning, right? Well, I don't care. Get dressed. Let's go. We got to get going. We ain't got time for this. I don't know how many times I say this. Like,
Ain't nobody got time.
yes, I'm sorry that you're a teenage girl and you have no clothes and you have nothing to wear and your hair's a mess and or you're a little boy who just wants to play with your Legos all day. We got to get to school. Let's go. Let's go. And that just starts them off on a terrible foot as opposed to being able to be like, you know what? Hey, let's take 20 minutes. Let's just have a breather. Let's, try to figure out because, right, there's typically something else going on underlining that emotion or those outbursts. And
Well, there's a lot of opportunities too. Like, one, we can go on vacations, not at the time everyone else does, right?
yes,
We
yes.
don't have snow days. We don't have teacher in service days. I guess an in-service day could be his mom is sick and there's no sub. There's a lot of opportunities for that. There's opportunities for like music lessons and piano lessons and those sorts of things that we can take time to do that and have unlimited availability to do that a lot of kids don't get to because our schedule's a little bit more flexible.
Well, and I think too, it helps you to cultivate your lessons towards them. Are they a hands-on learner? Are they an audio learner? How do they learn best? And then cultivating your lessons towards that to help them. I mean, you could not do that for 25
Sure.
students at all.
The final thing too is like, you mentioned your education. I have a master's degree, bachelor's degree, blah, blah, blah. Lynette does too. My wife does too. And she chose to stay home and take it upon herself to educate our children. And so when people have like, why would you do that? Well, she could be out there making her figures if she wanted to, but it was very important to us as a family that we build our children into the right kind of people. And we felt like that was something as a family we could do.
I agree. I think that is definitely commendable. Shout out to Lynette. She's awesome. And I agree. I mean, especially in today's society, right? Where I'm a strong, independent woman. I don't need nobody else. I'm not going to stay home with my kids. Now I'm sitting here going, oh my gosh, now I understand why women stayed home and did all this because there's so much to do. Like,
Yeah.
how do I balance all of this?
Yeah.
And we also had this ideology that the public school was the best option for our kids. And that may be the best option for some kids, right? But like, it's not a one size fits all, like the way that it's kind of portrayed to be. And so I think that when we start to look at that, like, what are some of our values? What are some of the experiences that we've seen come out of public schools? My cousins were homeschooled. And even though they were my cousins and I loved them to death, I still was like, that's the weirdest thing ever. You don't know what it's like to have a locker, like just weird things like that, that seems so common for public school and not for them. But I do think, there are a lot of advantages to the homeschooling and how to be able to feed into your children to help provide them and not entrusting them in strangers' hands for at least 8 hours a day. And not only is it a different stranger every year, right? As they move up and they have a new teacher, but then there's different specials teachers, different lunch people, all of these different strangers that are around your children. And you have to assume that they all have the best interests in mind for your kid. And in a perfect world would be the way, but that's honestly not and even if they're not like a predator or something, but like if they have an ideology that doesn't match up to yours, if they're not a Christian believer and you are, how is that going to affect your child?
Yeah,
And
heavy influence over your child. They're in a
yes.
position of trust and you're entrusting them as the parent. Yeah, it can be a scary position. Look at your kids. I mean, think of yourself even, I guess, to start. How many times did something not go right as a child and you were thinking, wow, now what I know now, I would have probably told my parent.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you think of your own children. Well, my daughter's very communicative. She'll tell us everything. My son's kind of like, hey, how was your day?
Mm.
Uh, mm. That's what we get. So there's a level of insecurity for me, just like, okay, now he's going into public school. And we've been really working on, let's get this communication up more. Like he'll talk, if it's all fun stuff or with his friends, he's a chatterbox. But when it's serious stuff, it's kind of like very limited. And so, yeah, we got to work on that.
One of the things I think that I struggle with the most, because my daughter is the same way. She's very quiet. Sometimes she can be chatty Cathy and stuff. It depends on the subject. Typically, you ask her like, "Oh, how was this?" So she'll say, "Not that bad." I'm like, "So not that good either, right?" Like, is that what that means? But it's been trying to empower her to stand up and say something or to notice things that
Sure.
aren't quite right. Like, hey, this doesn't seem right to you, right? Okay, then say something to the teacher, to an adult. How do you empower her? Because if they're not that communicative with you about what's going on, are they going to advocate for
Sure.
themselves and be communicative for themselves in
That's a
that
good point.
aspect? There's a lot of times I try to coach her, like saying like, okay, well, wait a minute. Like she'll, message me like, oh, this teacher is just being ridiculous. And I'm like, then you need to tell her or you need to tell your guidance counselor or something, and advocating that way. They were doing argumentative essays and they read part of the essay, Ethnic Hash, and it's talking about how this girl is made up of a multitude of different ethnicities. And then they go online to the Home Depot paint page and they're trying to match up their skin tone colors to paint swatches to see what color of paint they are.
Okay.
And like my daughter, she sends me a text. She's like, I'm gilded. I'm like, I don't think you're using that correctly. This doesn't make sense. But it made her uncomfortable because then the teacher starts talking about how, because the girl in the story had some Black ethnicity in her and she chose to identify as just plain Black. And the teacher starts talking about how she wishes like the white community was more like the Black community is and all of this stuff. And my daughter's like, I can't believe she's talking about this. This is craziness. She's basically saying that she wished she wasn't white. But it's just like trying to figure out how to empower your child to say, no, I'm not going for this, but also not do it in a rebellious,
Sure. Be respectful about it.
insubordinate way. Yes,
It's
yes,
very difficult to be a teenager, especially, and have to talk to adults about serious.
yes. I don't even like to be an adult and talk to adults about serious things.
So I'll share a story with you. When I was young, I used to really get nervous and agitated during Black History Month. And I don't know if I shared that with you before, but basically in California, when I was a kid, that month we'd have movies all the time showing basically what happens to Black people in the 60s and before, right? And wow, I think that was a
Rodney
very
King. So
yeah, there was that too. Yes, right around that time I was in high school. But so we would sit there and watch these movies, and wow, I think they were very valid. Being one of not the only African American in the class, everyone would stare at me to see my reaction as these bad, horrific things were happening, and talk about embarrassing and uncomfortable.
yeah,
And I would have to go through this every year when we would have this month. And so for me personally, I had wished I either wasn't there or was one of them while this was happening. So I understand the importance of that month, but it was also a little uncomfortable for my sister and I as we went through some of that stuff.
I bet. I bet. Especially because to me, granted, I don't know if I can truly speak about this as a white woman, but it makes me think that they're trying to tell you, get ready. This is what your life is going to be like. I hope you're ready for the fire hoses and all of the beatings and
Yep.
and stuff. And that's also not the message that we need to be sending to our children. Yes, educate them. Like this was a horrific thing that people did. Racism is not okay. But where we're at today, this is how we're trying to make these changes. And that's not what it's going to be like. I don't know if this is the correct terminology, but like there's not that chip on your shoulder if you encounter even just a police officer. Devin's mom, I remember after the Michael Brown situation in Ferguson, and his mom was like, anytime you encounter a cop, you just put your hands up. And Devin's like, well, first of all, Mom, I'm not breaking the law, okay? Like, I'm not stupid. Like, why are you even telling me
Yeah.
this? You know what I mean? He was 30 when this was going down. And it's just so sad that there's like, I mean, I tell my kids, no matter their ethnicity, if you encounter the police, you do what they say. I don't even care how wrong they are. We will figure it out. Trust me, I will mama bear out for you. Just go along
You
with it.
cooperate and you treat them with respect.
Yeah.
And you move on.
Yeah. But instead, it's like they're pushing this narrative of like, I think Black History Month pushes the narrative of you'll never amount to anything because of the color of your skin. And therefore, we have to do all of this stuff to make you feel better about yourself because you're never going to amount to anything.
Well, and let's pause. I believe heavily in self-empowerment. So I have been a victim of some extreme racism when I was a kid, very much so. So much so that I gave all my toys to them for them to stop and they would not stop. So I've been a part of that, but I think that personally, we have to overcome that in ourselves too. Like we're not a lifetime victim to that behavior. We're able to maybe separate, like, this is those bad people.
Yes.
And there's a lot of other good people. There's a lot of white people in this world who have helped me become who I am today. So, and then on top of that, I don't need someone to give their power to me for me to be great.
Yes.
So
Amen.
when we watch some of these shows and whatnot, I'm not, me personally, going to sit around and wait for someone to tell me I can. I'm going to go do. And that's what I think everybody should be about, is taking control of their life and their own power and not waiting for someone perceived or being told that they're better than you to tell you when you can.
Yeah, agreed. I definitely agree with that. And I think we need to start focusing more on like what you said, it's those people. It's that bad character. It's not a skin color characteristic. Just like we wouldn't say that all Black people are thugs, right? To make those assumptions about either side, any race, any ethnicity is just wrong. And we need to stop that and to stop that whole mentality of I, as a white woman, need to lower myself to make you as a Black man feel more comfortable. I don't think that's right either. Like, I think that we should both be able to just go out and be ourselves. And this is who we are. And this is what you get, kind of a thing. And may the best man win kind of mentality.
Well, and let's add too, I don't think guilt changes anybody.
No.
So if you need to feel guilty, we need to make people feel guilty about the past so that they change now. That's not going to change anybody. We have to change their hearts and their minds. And I think if I've seen people when I was a young adult, they behaved one way and they're totally different now. They've probably had conversations, experiences that have enlightened them to where maybe some of their thoughts were proven untrue. And I think that that's what we need to work towards more, is like changing hearts and minds and not guilting. Because if you're born today as a white woman, white man, you have absolutely nothing to do with what happened 200 years ago.
Yeah.
There's no way you have anything to do with that. And so guilting you into like treating someone like me better, that's not your heart. That's you're doing this because you feel guilty and need to do it.
Yeah.
And at any moment you can stop doing it because
and it makes me think that if you do have that guilt, is it because you are actively still thinking that way? Because that's a guilty conscience, right? So if I feel like I need to give you the parking spot because you're a Black man and you're at a disadvantage of getting that spot over me, a privileged white woman, is that because I think that I'm better than you? And so does that make sense? Like,
I joke with some of my buddies. I'm like, hey, Black History Month, I get to win every argument. So that it's just a bit of fun, but it's kind of funny. It's like, you owe me lunch and you let me win every argument.
My daughter tries to push Women's History Month. She's like, how dare you say that to me during Women's Month? And I'm like, first of all, I'm a woman too. So therefore, your argument is not valid at all. But that's fun. And I think we should have a sense of humor to some extent. I mean, if we can't laugh at ourselves and make fun of ourselves, then like, what good is life? Because you're obviously being way too serious.
Well, look at Saturday Night Live. That's why it's not funny anymore.
Yes, agreed. And I mean, I laugh at myself all the time too, because like I'm super clumsy. I fall all the time. I was walking through a room with a bunch of people and I had tripped and I fell onto this guy and he like helped, he kind of caught me kind of a thing. And I was like, I'm so sorry. Like I was embarrassed about that. But I just made fun of myself about it. Like,
Mhm.
yeah, of course, leave it to Stacy, of course she would stumble and fall. And yeah, I do think too, to kind of wrap up this portion of the conversation, I think one of the important things is, and something that I admire the most in you, is how I see you building a solid foundation in your home. You're a present father. You're trying to be involved. You want what's right for your children. And I think that that is something that we need across the board in all homes right now, whether they're homeschool or public school. Do you feel like the kids that you see in that when you're volunteering in the community, do you see that?
Well, it's hard to say exactly all their situations, but me personally, I'll share my dad had some issues with alcohol, and I had to lean heavily on my grandfather and my coaches. And so it was a challenging time for me as a youth. And so I get that. And I think too, like when I'm dealing with children, they're late to practice, they have an attitude, maybe they're upset about something. You have to think like a lot of those things may not necessarily be under their control. Like there's stuff that's happening in their life. Especially a kid shows up to practice late. I'm not going to chew them out as if they're under a certain age because, they have no control over that. And I think that whether there's a dad in the house or not, obviously I believe in families. And I think that, and that's just obviously I think mom and a dad is the best, but I think if you have a grandfather, you have other influences as well, because girls need their moms, boys need their dads,
Yeah.
and then they need each other too.
Yeah.
So I think that if I can be that male figure, even the tiniest amount of time that I have with the kids that I'm in contact with, they at least see a positive role model in their life, and they can see like, well, this is what a dad should be. Or they see like, because a lot of times I have my kids there too. So they see like, oh, this is what a dad looks like to his son or his daughter. Share a story. When I was a kid in high school, one of the players on my team, his name was Josh Reddy. He played nose tackle and I played tackle on defense and on the varsity level. And his dad, it was kind of a cheesy thing, but his dad would see him at practice and he was a junior in high school. And I remember just seeing this and observing, and his dad would say, "Hey, Josh, I love you." And he'd give him a big hug and a kiss. And I thought, that is the weirdest thing. Like a dad, hugging and embracing his son like that and telling him he loves him. But even though it seemed weird to me, it was like, you know what? I wish I had that. I wish I at least had, someone telling me that, someone supporting me, someone being like my biggest fan
Yeah.
and like hoping that I succeed, and someone that I can call and say, "Hey, I did it." So maybe I could be that to somebody else.
Yeah, I definitely agree. My daughter's father passed away when she was 5, and my husband's been in her life since she was 5 as well. So she's always had like that male, but I do find myself trying to fill that void. And I think you're absolutely correct that, the girls need their moms, but there is also that extent of needing their dads and stuff. I go above and beyond for her at her like sporting events and anything that she does, because I know that if her dad was here, I mean, he would be that obnoxious parent with the cowbell, even at the choir concert or something so like loud and obnoxious because of how proud he would be. And I think you're absolutely correct. Having that and is something that, a kid definitely looks forward to. And so between my husband and I, we both definitely try to like fill that void for her, because so I definitely agree that seeing that is helpful for the children.